If you are already going to work out 5 days a week and you have no problem working out, then great. Maybe you should just burn your fat and not use exogenous ketones, because you're going to be burning the exogenous ketones first. So there could be an argument made. But if you don't like working out and you only work out 3 days a week, but you want to work out 5 days a week, and taking the ester beforehand makes your workout more enjoyable, so you're more likely to add 20 minutes to the end, or more likely to go more days of the week, then it's more beneficial.
Yeah! What's up, everybody? Your life alchemist, your dragon. Welcome to Alchemize Life. I'm your host, Justin David Carl. This is a show where I seek out and share expertise, wisdom, and thought leadership in all domains with the mission of empowering and inspiring you to proactively design and truly live a life worth living. We're all in this together, and when we do the work together, we go so much farther, so much faster, and have so much more fun. Without further ado, let's dig into this episode and alchemize life. Franck, Llosa, got you on finally.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Of course, brother. To set the scene for the audience of who you are the founder of KetoneAid, also a father of three, entrepreneur, and a biohacker. And I'm really excited to talk with you because in this last year, I've gotten into supplementing with ketone esters, which up until I heard about them on a Ben Greenfield podcast, I had no idea what they were. And I still don't know a lot about them, but I've had a really fun and interesting journey of using them to enhance my sports performance as well as cognitive performance. So I'm stoked to have you on the show. But to kind of kick things off, I want you to tell us the story about using your wife as a guinea pig for your biohacking.
Right. Yeah. So we like to experiment with new things. Biohacking, I define biohacking as doing things 10 or 20 years before the science figures it all out. That's how I define it. It's like I'm in the midst of doing clinical trials and I see how long that they take, and certain things that are just so obvious, but it just takes years and years to prove it. So this is kind of leapfrogging that and trying different things and seeing what works for your body. So we were both trying to do the ketogenic diet, and part of that was before the ketone ester was available, before I came out with the ketone ester. Part of that was drinking MCT oil. And with the C8 version of the MCT oil, if you just take 10% too much, it just feels like you're on the Game of Thrones and people are stabbing you with knives in the stomach and like, what the hell's going on? So my number 2 viewed video on YouTube, I don't even know if she knows that it's up there, is her with the toilet seat closed and just being like, oh my God, my stomach, from consuming the C8. So she's like, what do you make me this guinea pig. And, and another time she was entering into doing the ketogenic diet and getting the keto flu, and is in a fetal position in bed. Like, oh my God, my eyes feel like they're bulging out and my heart is racing. And she was getting what was called the keto flu. And I called some experts and they're like, oh, give her 22 salt pills. And I'm like, what? That's going to overdose her. Like, no. Within 15 minutes, she was up and out. So just understanding that the keto flu is all about salt intake. And, but so yeah, she doesn't after a while, she's like, I'm done being your guinea pig with all these, try this new ketone ester. How does this taste? Does it taste like vomit or does it, it's like, no.
Awesome. So. Oh, I love that. Well, it's good she supports your, love of biohacking, at least to some extent, and provides massive entertainment value.
Yeah.
So one of the big themes of this show is the entrepreneurial journey. And, I've listened to a few of your podcasts, interviews on other people's shows, and they kind of so far, I haven't heard anything about how you actually started your company.
Okay.
And I'd love to kind of go through that. How'd you get into this space? Why did you start KetoneAid? How did you start it? So let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. So yesterday I was at Natural Expo East, and people oftentimes ask me, "Oh, what's your background?" Because I'm talking about all the science, and I love to say with a deadpan face, "Real estate." So completely unrelated fields. So this does show that you can go into a completely unrelated field. I was doing real estate, own a real estate company. It was going great, going fine, and I would hear these rumblings at when I was visiting my father-in-law about his college roommate and how he should be given gold medals for the UK winning all these, Olympic races. And I finally started to understand that his roommate in college was Dr. Richard Veach. And I'm showing you this book. It's Ketones, the Fourth Fuel by Travis Christofferson, a great book. Maybe you can put it in the show notes.
Absolutely.
It's a 250-year deep dive into how the ketones came about. And Dr. Veach was the inventor of the Ketone Ester. He actually spent 40 years at NIH trying to figure this out and make it so that you can drink ketones, which we will talk about in a second what that is. And his vision was that people would drink $60 worth of this drink that tastes like vomit. And, he wanted me to help him just get money, just get someone to give me $40 million and we'll just make a tanker car full of it. And people will just walk up to the tanker car and get their ketones and that be it. Like not really respecting business and process and milestones and stuff like that. Oh, forget that stuff. Let's just make tanker cars of it. So I was, trying to help him pitch to venture capitalists to raise money to get this done. And the pitch wasn't very good. $60 a day worth of something that tastes like vomit. They'd rather invest in CBD oil or whatever was hot, 5 or 6 years ago. And I had some success from a previous .com in the 2001 .com bubble. So I was super conservative. So leaving all my money in cash, not even in stocks, because, now stocks are tanking. So now I look great. And I decided, why don't I just put my money where my mouth is? I believe in this and I'm asking people for money. I have some money sitting around. Why don't I just go and do it? And I got his blessing. And so I went on a journey, and the first 2 years was just R&D for how to make this molecule, because Dave Asprey spent $25,000 for one serving of this molecule 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, wow.
The Tour de France teams were spending $6,000 for probably a larger bottle, but $6,000 for a liter bottle of this ketone ester drink. It was just way too expensive to mass market and commercialize. Yeah. So there was a lot of R&D. At one point in time, actually hiring 3 different R&D labs across the world to try to solve one problem. And 1 or 2 of them would come back and say, oh, it's impossible. But thank God I had that third one, because that third one found a way to do it. Slightly different temperature, slightly different, variables change, and they're able to crack the code to make the ketone ester more efficiently. And we launched with we were constantly delaying launching the product. And then I finally said, you know what, there's nothing better to light a fire under chemists by selling it first. So let's just sell it first, and then be like, yep, I have the demand. Like, none of this theoretical, I think I can sell a lot. No, I just sold $150,000 worth. Like, when can you scale this up? So we did an Indiegogo, similar to Kickstarter.
Oh, interesting.
$25,000 target, and we had compiled a couple of years worth of email lists of people that read the science, understood the science. There's a little bit of a backlog of some science and research that had been done before it was commercial. And we were able to make tiny quantities that we sent to Ben Greenfield that you mentioned. And I think I might have drank the drink once, maybe twice in the first 2 years, because it was $500. I mean, you can't really put a price tag on it because it was thousands of dollars per serving, because we'd only get tiny amounts. So I'm like, well, I'd rather give it to Ben Greenfield and have him win some Spartan race than me drink it and tell you that I ran around the block 3 times with the dog. Like, it doesn't prove anything that I've drank it. So I didn't drink it that much. I saved it for people like Ben Greenfield, and then would interview them. And I had 5-10 elite athletes, all unpaid, being interviewed with what happened to them when they took it. So our $25,000 target, we ended up selling $150,000 worth. And we had a target date of delivering by, I think it was like February 15th. And everyone got at least one serving by February 15th. And then over the next 6 to 9 months was catching up to the mega orders and bigger orders. And, some people ordered, $25,000, $30,000 worth because they understood the science and they wanted it first and fast. So the first 2 years R&D, then we have about a year of catching up to those initial orders. And then the next couple of years was still trying to catch up with demand. And because we actually manufacture the product in the US as opposed to many of the ketone salt companies, this inferior product that we'll go into, they just buy it from China. They put it in a bag in the US, drop it into a bucket, and then they say made in the US because someone dropped it in a bucket from a bag, from a Chinese bag to an American bucket. They're allowed to say made in the US or manufactured in the US. No.
Yeah, there's so much shady stuff in the supplement world of supplements. Couple questions. First, other than kind of like, hearing the grumblings of your grandfather, I think
wife's
you said
wife's godfather.
Like, what was kind of like the impetus to like go and jump into this as like an opportunity? Right. I mean, you were already successful in real estate. Like, why take all this risk?
Yeah, great question. So my first introduction to ketogenic diet actually went back 5 years earlier, and I didn't know what it was, but I was about to go out partying with a friend of mine. And before going out, he opened up the fridge. I just remember it distinctly. Opened up a fridge, took out a pound of soft white cheese, downed the entire white cheese, the entire pound. And I said, "What in the world are you doing?" He's like, "I'm losing weight." I'm just thinking, good luck, buddy. And I had no idea about fat for weight loss and ketogenic diet. I was just like, yeah, you're eating a pound of fat. Let me know how that goes. So I kind of had that in the back of my head. And then another friend of mine wrote a blog post about how he went on a ketogenic diet and he went down this rabbit hole of this concept of eating 80% fat, 15% protein, 5% carbs. So I started to go down this rabbit hole that I'd never heard of. So some of your listeners might have never heard of this. They might have heard of ketogenic diet. They might have heard of Atkins, which is kind of similar, but it's not exactly the same. Atkins is higher protein. You don't really make ketones always with Atkins. And so I went down this deep dive so that when I had a conversation with Dr. Beach at someone's birthday party, I was able to hold a conversation with him. And he's not used to talking to people because, he's like, go spend 5 hours learning about it, then come back and talk to me, because he doesn't like pitching or explaining things from scratch. It's just too frustrating for him when he's worked on something for 40 years to tell a newbie, what are ketones? It's just not worth the energy. Yeah. But it was just really exciting and really exciting. A lot of people weren't able to get it right away, weren't able to understand it. But once I was able to have that aha moment that, this could be the fourth food group. You got glucose, you got carbs, protein, fat, and then you have this new fourth food group. What is the potential of that? And I've given the analogy of, imagine the world lived with only fat and carbs and someone invented protein. Like people say, oh, what's the potential of ketones? Well, it's kind of like someone inventing protein. It's pretty endless and pretty huge, and kind of got sucked into it and decided to go for it.
Interesting. Now, did you have so just to kind of set, the scene, I am definitely not into the ketogenic diet. Like I'm a predominantly whole food plant-based vegan. I would call myself like high carb, like 50 to 60% of my diet is from whole food carbs. But I'm curious, like, A, why did you go keto, and like B, like kind of like what were the effects that like made you kind of like want to go down this rabbit hole even more so?
Yeah. So I had to experiment on myself, and I'm actually vegan and keto, which a lot of people don't think that can match. I even saw a podcast where it was like a vegan, I think Rich Roll versus somebody else who was keto, and they were going at it. It's like, well, you can actually live together and you can actually be vegan keto.
Imagine that.
It is possible. Just lots of avocados. And I have videos on YouTube of like how I do my keto vegan. And I don't really push much for the vegan part. I push more for the F sugar part. Very anti-sugar. And when I say sugar, I mean carbs, not just white powder sugar. So yeah, when I first started the ketogenic diet, I actually lost too much weight. I wasn't trying to lose weight, but my back felt great. I had great energy, and I just was skipping meals left and right because I had ketones naturally in my system. You just don't crave food the same way. But the biggest single difference was reading my kids a book to go to sleep. At 7 p.m., if I was not keto, I almost every time would be just falling asleep reading them the book. And once I was keto, that just never happened in the next 5 or 6 years. But just the way that the energy and glucose spikes and crashes, you crash faster in the end of the day. And when you're on keto and you have ketones in your system, you just don't crash like that. And that was the biggest difference was, just something as simple as being able to read my kids, a book to bed.
Yeah. More sustained energy, over the day.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. We might have to dig in that a little bit, but just so we can start to, because I'm sure my audience is like, okay, what the heck is a ketone?
Yeah, I can start from the top with what the ketogenic diet is. So the ketogenic diet is a high fat, low carb, but also low protein diet. A lot of people miss the protein part, and that's one of the top 3 ways that people do keto wrong, which we can go into. They eat too much protein because they think, well, okay, I get the idea of no carbs, but it's not fathomable for them to eat such high amounts of protein, high amounts of fat. So what's left is protein. So they just stockpile the protein. Well, that's not ketogenic because excess protein actually converts into carbohydrates. A fancy word that I can drop. I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, but I know the word gluconeogenesis, which took me many years. And that is converting protein to carbs. So if you have too much protein, it's not going to work. You're not going to be in a ketogenic state. So when you're in a ketogenic state, I think of it as like a battery in your system, and that battery is full of glucose, otherwise known as carbs or sugar. And once you need that system to go all the way down to 0 before your body will go into this emergency mode of, oh my God, I haven't eaten for 3 days, or I haven't had any carbs or very limited amount of carbs. And your body goes into this emergency state, and it actually burns your fat reserves to make something called ketones, also known as D-beta hydroxybutyrate. And the idea is when the caveman was trying to kill the woolly mammoth, they would eat a huge amount and then maybe not eat for another 7 days, 30 days, multiple days. And the body needs to be very strong and smart after 7 days, not just more and more tired and you would just die. So the ketones actually they start kicking in as this emergency fuel source, going to the brain, going to the muscles, and make the caveman sharper so that on day 7, day 10, they can go kill the next animal while being sharp. So with, where we are right now, the body will make this emergency fuel, burn fat to make ketones. And then the ketones have many benefits when they're in your system, such as longevity, anti-inflammation, just not being tired, energy, there's dozens and dozens of reasons for going on a ketogenic diet. But many people know of it only for diet and for weight loss. But I know many people that have no weight loss issues whatsoever, and they still do the ketogenic diet more for their brain and performance and stuff like that. So that's the diet is a ketogenic diet, but you do not need a ketogenic diet in order to use exogenous ketones. Exogenous ketones is this umbrella of products that allow you to consume something, and then you have ketones in your bloodstream. And what is misunderstood is a lot of these companies say, drink this drink and you're in ketosis in 30 minutes. It's a very misleading statement. I'm the only company that does not make that statement and tries to correct and educate the consumer. The word ketosis can have 2 definitions. Ketosis is what your body normally does when you're on a ketogenic diet. It burns fat to make ketones. Ketosis can be defined as ketones in your blood. So if you're to test your finger with a blood meter, not a urine strip, but a blood meter, you would have ketones in your blood. Some people define that as ketosis. But the other definition of ketosis is burning fat to have ketones in your blood. And the problem is when you drink exogenous ketones, there's ketones in your blood when you prick your finger, but you're not burning fat to get there. It's skipping literally skipping the fat burning stage to put ketones into your bloodstream. But the consumer hears, drink this drink and you're in ketosis in 15 minutes. They think that if they sit on a couch watching TV and they drink this drink, that their body will magically be burning fat. They're kind of making this scientific leap that doesn't exist, and it's just confusing to customers. They think that they can have more cheat meals and this puts you back into ketosis. No, the cheat meal refills that battery that I talked about. So you're back to a full battery, and it takes another week to get it down to zero. And taking the ketones doesn't make that that battery get depleted. Now, there are ways you can use it strategically to not eat for a day or two. Sure, then that's going to lower that glucose reserve. And there's ways to use ketones to enter into a ketogenic diet and help avoid keto flu, but it's just not the same as burning fat. So we don't market the product for weight loss. We even have a chart of like 10 different ways to use our 5 different products, and then there's one line that says weight loss, and I just put a red X all the way across, because the number of people that contact me and say, oh, I just had a cake last night and then I took ketones and then in the morning I weighed a pound more. This doesn't work. And I'm just like, no, unless you take the time to really understand this stuff, do not buy it. And there's even like keto diet pills that make all these claims, and they claim that they're on Shark Tank, and this company got like great spam lists, and it was so bad that Shark Tank had to have a segment saying, we never sold any keto diet pills, and we were never on the podcast, no matter what superimposing that they did with the Shark Tank people holding keto diet pills. And I'd have people call me crying saying, hey, I bought your keto diet pills and you put me on a subscription and I can't pay my monthly rent. I can't pay my electric bill because you charged $70 to my account. And it wasn't me. It was these scam artists that get people on these subscriptions buying these keto pills that are just garbage. And yeah, so there's a lot of crap out there. So there's this umbrella category called exogenous. Exogenous means consumed externally. And it can include anything from something called MCT oil. It's a type of liquid coconut oil, the C8. This is the same thing that my wife had, that you have to slowly build up your tolerance. And if you take even a little bit too much, they call it the disaster pants diet. And some people put it in their coffee as well, have like a buttered morning coffee. So that's an exogenous ketone, because 15% of that tablespoon will turn it into ketones in your system. It'll go through your liver and make D-beta hydroxybutyrate. Then there's something that came out called ketone salts, and 90% of the ones that are on the market right now are what are called racemic. But first of all, the ketone salt, the ketone itself, D-beta hydroxybutyric acid, is in an acid form. So if you drank it directly, the pH would be way too low. It'd burn a hole in your gut. So these companies did is they bound it to a salt, otherwise known as a base, salt, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. Sometimes they do tricks where they increase one by 3x, so you can say sodium free, but all they did is skyrocket the amount of magnesium, so you get the runs. So these are ketone salts, but the salt load is so high that it just impairs the performance of the ketones. It's just not like the ketones, not like the ketone ester that we have. It's just not nearly as effective. And then most of them are what are called racemic, which means only half of it is bioavailable. So you might have seen products like L-tryptophan or D-ribose. Sometimes it's the D form of a molecule that the body can use, kind of like a battery has a positive and a negative energy. Well, with these molecules, certain forms the body can use and certain forms the body cannot recognize. So most of the products on Amazon are racemic ketone salts. Half of them don't work. The salt, half of the molecule doesn't work, doesn't create energy, and they usually load it with a bunch of caffeine because they want you to quote unquote feel it, and you're feeling the caffeine, you're not feeling the ketones. And for some people that are entering into a ketogenic diet, they also think that they feel this drink, but the problem is when you're entering into a ketogenic diet, you lose many pounds of water. That's why people like it, because they think that they are losing weight right away. It's just water weight. But and for the first few days, and then they plateau and they get disappointed. But that's when it starts to work. The magic starts to work after a week. Don't give up. But they lose a lot of water. But with that water goes massive, massive amounts of electrolytes, which is why my wife was in a fetal position in bed, because she lost all of these electrolytes. And yeah, she might, put a little bit of extra salt in her food. No, you need to take when people say, oh, I added extra salt to my eggs or whatever, I say, did you unscrew the top of your salt shaker and put it on? Because that's the amount of massive salt that you need to replenish for the first few days. So these ketone salts technically, accidentally, have a lot of salt. So people feel like they're getting out of the keto flu, feel like they're much better, and they think that it's the ketones that they consume, but it's not. It's the salt. And I say, save yourself a lot of money. Just buy a bunch of salt pills, like literally salt pills, or your salt shaker. You want to try to get some potassium in there as well. Save a lot of money on salt. So they think that it works, but then after 2 weeks, they can't put their ring fingers on when they're taking this because the excess salt leads to just inflammation. So they literally can't put their rings on their fingers. So then they put the ketone salts away until the next time that they have cheat meals or get out of ketosis and they want to get back in, and they start all over again. But they don't work. None of the clinical trials use ketone salts successfully. And what these companies do is they do what I call science hijacking. They say, look at these clinical trials that prove that ketones work, but all of those clinical trials are using the ketone ester, our molecule. But then they say, oh, well, that's a ketone and ours is a ketone, so they're about the same thing. So they try to do hijacking of the science. It's not the same molecule. It doesn't do the same thing. And there's a reason why no clinical trials have shown any benefit with the ketone salts, because they just don't work. So then our molecule is called a ketone ester, and it's D-beta hydroxybutyric acid, the same ketone acid, but instead of being bound to a salt, it's bound to something called R13-butanediol. R13-butanediol is an amazing molecule in and of itself, which we'll get into. And what happens is the ketone ester, when you consume it, enters into your bloodstream. So the ester form is important because it actually enters into the bloodstream as an ester. Initially, they thought that it separated in the gut, but drug companies will make an ester form to get into the blood. So it gets into the blood, and then it separates. Enzymes in your blood will separate it, leading to a fast release, D-beta hydroxybutyrate, directly into your system, into your bloodstream. And then the R13-butanediol goes through the liver, gets processed multiple times, and 70 to 80% of that converts to ketones, beta hydroxybutyrate. So it's this dual release, no salt needed, so you don't have that massive salt load. You can take 5, 10, 20 times more. And sometimes ketone ester gets a bad rap for being quote unquote really expensive. Early podcasts, people said, oh, I had to mortgage my house to pay for ketone esters. Well, it's not my fault that you can take 20 times more, but on a cost per gram basis, or even more importantly, a cost per effective basis, it's actually less expensive than almost all of the ketone salts that are on the market. So you just take much, much less. And initially we do sell a $30 bottle, but then, and people were supposed to consume the entire amount, but based on consumer feedback, they were just using the cap. The cap accidentally became, the serving size. And I listened to my customers like crazy. We have a Facebook group with 3,000 members. Anybody ever text message me something that doesn't work or something negative about the ketone ester, I say, hey, go to the group and post your negative thing and we can talk through it. And they're like, you want me to post something negative about your product? I'm like, yeah, because then they're going to believe all the positive stuff. If you post all the negative, then they're going to believe the positive. And so the cap itself became the measuring tool. And I even changed the labeling and serving sizes. And when I was going to change the bottle, the manufacturer wanted to put a smaller cap because we couldn't find the bigger ones. I said, no, that's our serving size now. We'll have to, have a separate tablespoon added to it if we don't keep the cap. So it's highly effective in tiny, tiny amounts. And even you, right before the podcast, took 1, maybe 2 capfuls of this. And that's between $2 and $4 worth. And it's more expensive than a couple niacin pills, but niacin also doesn't turn your brain on the same way. So the last molecule in this list of exogenous ketones is R13-butanediol. So the ketone ester is where all the science is. That's where 20 clinical trials for ketone ester, half of them using my product. So then the R13-butanediol, I asked the scientists 5 years ago, why can't you just give the R13-butanediol by itself? Why make an ester that's more expensive? If 70% of it converts to DBHB, why not just give 25% more and call it a day? And his answer was epic. He said, the mice were stumbling. So the mice were drunk. So
Yeah.
R13-butanediol is technically an alcohol in its pure form by itself, and the scientists just kind of discarded it because they can't give that for all the intended purposes that they're trying to treat. They don't want people that are drunk, and that's when I ran off and filed a patent for human consumption of R13-butanediol as a ethanol alcohol, beer, whiskey alternative. And that's where our new line of products, the sister company called Hard Ketones, has a drink called R13, and that is a drink that will skyrocket your ketones but get you slightly intoxicated. It's a very different effect from the Ketone Ester. It's not for cognitive improvement. It's not for sports performance. It makes people feel more relaxed, like they've taken a Xanax. They want to sit back and relax, not get motivated to go to the gym. So every molecule has a different, benefit. And so one serving of the Ketone Ester, we call it 2.5 grams of active. But the R13 drink, we put 12.5 grams of it. So it's like for one quote unquote serving. So they just do different things, need different quantities of it. But that drink in and of itself, which we'll get into, is, super neat.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Veg Nutrition. Live better. So I'm actually a veg elite athlete, and before I joined the team, I spent months doing my due diligence to make sure that the company was vision, mission, and value aligned with me, my values, my mission, my vision, and my lifestyle. I got to know the owners super well. I even got to know the person who formulates all the products, and they passed with flying colors. So I couldn't be more excited to represent a company that I feel so aligned with. And I want to tell you about two of my favorite products. The first is the veg pre-workout. So when I first went vegan, or mostly vegan, the last thing for me to go fully vegan was finding a vegan pre-workout that gave me the focus, the energy, and the power that I was looking for. And I can tell you, this is the best pre-workout that I've ever had. It gives me incredible focus and energy. And what's probably the best is it leaves me with no crash after I take it, which is great. And the flavors are so freaking good. There's literally peach mango and a Patriot Pop that tastes like, the firecracker popsicles, cherry lemon lime flavor. They're literally so good that I can dry scoop them. And they just released a watermelon flavor for just in time for summer, and it's incredible. So that's the first product. The second product is arguably also my favorite, and that's the plant protein. Comes in 3 incredible flavors: chocolate peanut butter, vanilla ice cream, and cold brew coffee. Yep, you heard me. Cold brew coffee flavor. It tastes incredible, all 3 flavors. 25 grams of protein, fully organic, incredible ingredients, heavy metal tested, and it is my go-to post-workout. Make sure that I'm recovering and refueling and giving my muscles the protein that they need to rebuild for that next workout. So go to vegnutrition.com/dragon and try their full line of supplements, and you'll get 15% off. Or you can just use Dragon at checkout and you'll get 15% off. So that's vegnutrition.com/dragon to get 15% off. Veg Nutrition. Live better. Awesome. Cool. So I want to kind of tackle this in 2 ways. One, I want to kind of talk about the performance benefits of, KE4 Pro product, because that's the product that I use, pretty much every single day. And I want to talk about all the different ways to use it and not use it, all the different ways to like stack it with other things and things to avoid. Because I'm sure there's some things I'm doing that are great and some things that I'm doing that aren't so great. And I just want to educate myself and educate the audience.
Yeah, so if we optimize it, it costs less because you can take less of it. So it's really good to have, a check-in with me to be like, oh yeah, take it here, tweak it here.
Yeah. So typically I'll just share how I've been taking it. I usually like to do a lot of my workouts, or at least part of my workout, completely fasted. So I eat dinner, usually sometime between 5 and 7, and then I won't work out until about 12 hours later. I usually, I would say on average, I'm working out about 10 to 12 hours after my dinner. I'll go to sleep, wake up, and then I'll work out. And I will take 1 to 2 capfuls of the KetoneAid, right before I start my warm up, which my warm up is generally 20 to 30 minutes on the Stairmaster.
Right.
And
how's it taste?
So when I first started, it was terrible, but now it's weird. It's kind of like, you and I've talked about this offline, but I've been sober, for 7 or 8 years now. It's kind of like, it like coffee or alcohol. I've now have an acquired taste for it. So I kind of like the taste of it now. But when I first tried it, I was like, oh, this is terrible. So, but I just, I'm just taking 1 or 2 capfuls. So it's not like I'm like sitting there sipping on a drink and like, oh, this is terrible. Right. So
but
now
it's strong. It's strong. It's like a shot of apple cider vinegar. But if you expect an orange juice and you drink
way better than apple cider vinegar. Okay. I've taken shots of pure apple cider vinegar many times.
But some people, they expect orange juice. They think sports drink, they expect orange juice. And then they're like blown away. They're like, what is this? This is not for human consumption.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I'm curious, I've actually never tried this because I was just down the capful, but like if you mix it into like a sweet beverage, do you taste it or does it kind of dissipate?
Here's the trick. If you put it 1 or 2 capfuls of water into a shot glass, so you kind of dilute it like a 1-to-1 ratio, you want to take it down in one gulp. When you put it into a large water bottle for slow release, the entire water bottle tastes horrible. Or people try to put it in their smoothie. First of all, you don't want to take it with food, but that entire smoothie will be disgusting. Some people have put it in coffee, and we'll talk about caffeine. I'm kind of anti-caffeine, but if you put it in a decaf, or if you're going to have coffee anyhow, you can put it in coffee. It kind of does mask it there. But for the most part, we try to have people just take it down as a shot with a little bit of water and sparkling water. Sparkling water will make it actually go down a little bit better. We then subsequently came out with a drink called KE1, which we can get into, which has 6 times more water and can be diluted into a water bottle. And it actually tastes great. It tastes like a peachy drink. And then ultimately we just last month came out with Ketone water, which is a 12-ounce drink, which is about the same, a little bit more than 1 capful of KE4 put into a 12-ounce drink. And that one we call a functional sparkling water, very low on the sweetness, and it just tastes like a sparkling water. So with no protocols, no best time to take it, just when do you drink sparkling water? Just grab one of these instead. You can drink 1 to 5 per day. And so we've evolved from that historic. Peter Attia had an interview with Tim Ferriss, how he had an early version of this stuff, and he actually thought about almost vomiting on his kitchen table at 6 a.m. in the morning because it tasted so bad, and he knew that it cost $1,000 to make it, so he almost had to think about scraping it off the kitchen counter to consume it again. And he gave this graphic image that people that listen to Tim Ferriss's podcast, they thought of Ketone Esters from that moment forward as the world's nastiest tasting drink. So we've come a long way to a more diluted and actually an enjoyable drink. But the KE4, 90% of our customers, they drink it direct. Sometimes I find myself, I do dilute it usually, and my wife will make fun of me because she takes it straight. And I'm like, well, it tastes bad. But a little splash of water, no big deal. And some people say it tastes so bad it's got to work. So maybe there's a placebo part of
Yeah.
it where
I mean, I usually just take it, and then, I stack it with a pre-workout, which does have caffeine in it, and we will talk about caffeine.
Yeah.
But let's like make sure we cover this one first.
Sure.
So, kind of like before a workout on an empty stomach, being fasted for like 10 to 12 hours, that's like an optimal time to take it.
Well, that is one way to take it, but it depends on what your goal is. So if your goal is weight loss, there's a debate can be made. If you are already going to work out 5 days a week and you have no problem working out, then great. Maybe you should just burn your fat and not use exogenous ketones, because you're going to be burning the exogenous ketones first. So there could be an argument made. But if you don't like working out and you only work out 3 days a week, but you want to work out 5 days a week, and taking the ester beforehand makes your workout more enjoyable, so you're more likely to add 20 minutes to the end, or more likely to go more days of the week, then it's more beneficial. But I have this, one biohacking nurse lady who works out, and she says she takes it after her workout because she wants to use her own body fat during the workout. And then afterward, she'd be super hungry, normally would go grab a smoothie. Now she takes ketone ester. It helps for the recovery from the workout you just did, either long-term for muscles, but also bringing your brain back for the workday. So if you're working out in the morning, it's sometimes can be taxing on your brain. And then you go to work, the ketone ester brings your brain back, as well. So and keeps you from having that smoothie, which is great, because
This is
a
why
lot
I
of it is
want to
about
talk to
calorie
you.
reduction. Yeah.
Because so I think literally tomorrow I'm going to try that. I'm not going to have it before my workout, and then after my workout I'm going to have a cap or two full and see like if it kind of like because I'm like one of those people who, like, if I do anything, I train too hard, and so I like to see, like, will this help me kind of like perk back up, because I really give my workouts my all, and will kind of like help me perk back up. And then, like, tomorrow's not a work day, but it's a great day for me to kind of just see how it works for me to have it post workout. Okay.
But do you have sugar? Do you have sugar in that pre-workout drink? That's going to be a big variable as well.
If anything, there's just some stevia in it. It's like super,
Great.
It's only, I think 2 scoops are like 8 calories or something.
Okay, but sugar is what matters in that equation. But if it has stevia, then why bother? They're not going to be putting in sugar. Usually
no
they
sugar
don't put
in
sugar
it.
and stevia.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's vegan as well.
Now I didn't talk about this product. It's what we call snake water. So this is our all-in-one.
Your naming for that one is just hilarious. And I definitely want to know about snake water, and I got to try snake water because from what I've heard, it has a bunch of different nootropics in it.
Yeah, so snake water is me making fun of all these companies that make all these claims. Like you'll see on Bang Energy Drink, creatine does this, all these claims. I'm like, well, I can't play that game. I can't play I can claim more than you can claim. So I do this, like, arm wrestling, take it over the top, and we say this will make you run 3 times faster. It'll make you swim 2 times, faster. And then in parentheses, it says versus walking versus floating, just making fun of the claim game. So snake water, the whole snake oil fake thing.
Yeah.
Just embracing that. But then the hashtag is, but it works. So we have NFL players that love it. And it has branched chain amino acids. It has 2 ingredients, dynamine and T-cream, that are kind of like caffeine, but not stimulants. And they don't have the learned effect of caffeine, where caffeine stops working over time. This does not stop working. But then it has nootropics in it, huperzine, like basically the entire kitchen sink of every and any stack and supplement that I loved. I put it in here. Like, you asked me, what would you stack it with? Well, this already has every single, B12, L-theanine, L-carnosine, niacin, huperzine, cordyceps, like the highest quality cordyceps. It's just taurine, beta-alanine, just everything. Oh, and it also has a slow carbohydrate. So if you take too much ketone esters, it'll drop your blood sugar too much and can impair performance. By having a non-glycemic index, slow carbohydrate that doesn't give you a blood glucose spike, but just kind of gives you a baseline, the idea is that the ketones won't drop your blood sugar as much and impair performance, but then give you that steady. So that's our pre-workout, kind of what you're trying to do separately. That's our attempt to put it, all in one.
And you can stack the KE4 with the snake water.
No, the snake water would be instead of KE4 because it has ketone ester.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry. It has ketone ester in it with all these other ingredients and a whole bunch of salt as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely have to try that. And that the snake water I could take on an empty stomach and train fasted as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we talk about adding other things to the stack, because there's a couple things I'm kind of curious about. I've heard mention of people using it to get better sleep. So I wear both a Whoop and an Aura ring and a Garmin, actually. Nice. I was wondering if that was a Aura.
Yeah, I made my wedding ring gold. Just to have fewer rings. I have my Aura ring. That's a gold. My wife didn't mind, so that's my wedding ring is a gold.
Yeah, I have a fancy wedding ring, but I wear my black onyx Whoop as my wedding ring. So, how do you use it to get better sleep?
Yeah, so it's very counterintuitive. It's like, what? Like, you're using this drink and you're gonna use it for sports performance, and now we're talking about sleep. But right before we get to sleep, sports performance, we didn't talk about 80% of the Tour de France teams use Ketone Ester and have used them over the last 5 years. The hat that I'm wearing, Quick Step, they've been using it secretly for 4 years, using our product. Finally got them to admit it. So we went from never sponsoring anyone and actually making a joke of it, saying we don't sponsor athletes. We just get athletes sponsored, like literally getting them from 10th place in the nation to like 1 and 2. Then they get the Red Bull contracts. We're like the secret thing that gets them sponsored, to sponsoring the number one team in the world, not like the local high school and then go into the college and then a local professional team. We went straight to the number one team in the world, and that allowed me to also visit the Tour de France and go on a VIP in the Tour de France. That was
that's rad. So actually, before we talk about sleep, let's talk about how do athletes like cyclists use it?
Yeah, so it's very, very tricky, and we have different protocols. Because it changes everything. So glucose is the fuel that, carbs are king, has been the mantra for the last 20 years. Well, this is the emperor. Like, this is bigger than the king. This challenges the baseline substrate of glucose being king. So there's many, many different ways for athletes to take it. And sometimes they have to change their protocol. So if you normally eat a bowl of cereal, oatmeal, 2 hours before your marathon race, and then 3 gel packs right before, and then you suddenly want to, do the ketone ester protocol, it might require no morning breakfast and then no gel packs beforehand. And they're like, well, I'll skip the breakfast, but I still want to do the gel pack, and so they won't follow the protocol. And sometimes it's actually good that their performance is exponentially worse, because when the ketone ester really works and you nail it and you get all the variables right, it's great. But when it doesn't work, your blood glucose can tank, and it can impair performance. And I was on doing a phone call with a Miami cycling coach, and he said the first 3 times he took ester, one time he had to call his wife after an hour and a half to come pick him up because it was so bad. But he actually saw that as a good news, because if it did nothing and it was no different than the last week, then he'd be like, oh, this is, snake oil. But the fact that it did something made him say, maybe I just took it wrong. So the protocols change, where you might have to skip meals beforehand. You might have to stop the glucose and then take ketones, take it on, fasted workouts. And so what we're thinking is happening, and a lot of this hasn't been proven yet in science, this is part of the biohacking side, is that if you take a small amount of ketone ester on an empty stomach, 2 things are happening. One, you're not getting the harmful effects of glucose and carbohydrates. So glucose is a dirty fuel. It makes lactic acid. Ketones make 0 lactic acid, like literally no lactic acid buildup. There's no byproduct like glucose. Glucose creates inflammation. Glucose isn't efficient for the heart. All these negatives for glucose, you're taking away all these negatives. So that's one benefit. And then you're bringing in the ketones in this fasted state that otherwise, if you just worked out fasted, your body might not make enough or won't make enough ketones to catch up with what your body needs. So by taking these exogenous ketones, we think that it is triggering, in a sports sense, not sitting on the couch, but triggering in a sports sense some endogenous production. Because if you drink 1 or 2 capfuls, you look at this and say, hey, that's 12, 24 calories. How's that lasting more than 7.5 minutes, on a treadmill? But we think that it's triggering endogenous production and taking away all that inflammatory glucose negative, and culminating in people having, much much better workouts. So
Mm-hmm.
how to take it as an athlete? Most of the elite athletes are scared to take it during the performance
Mm-hmm.
still, because unless they've really spent years with it and perfected it, and so a few of them have, but many of them, what happens is they take too much during the performance, and they don't want to stop any of the protocols of meal beforehand and glucose, and they find that it limits their peak all out speed. So a cyclist oftentimes will have bursts of 3 minutes of going full speed,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have that full speed burst. They only go up 95%, 98%. They can't hit 100% because they've taken too much ketone ester, and that's blocked glucose uptake. So the way that a lot of professional athletes take it is the very simple way, which is post workout recovery, and then
Mm.
before bed again for recovery. It's kind of like
Okay.
taking it twice. And there was a clinical trial where they took it post workout and before bed. I don't know if they took a pre-workout. I should know that, but they simulated a Tour de France, a 15-day hard cycling event, and then at the end, both groups took did a 20-minute time trial. And the group that was taking ketone ester was 15% faster, so 15% more recovered, and that's just huge. That's not a 1 or
That's
2%.
massive.
Just
Yeah,
massive.
that's
So from a recovery standpoint, it's a no-brainer. Now, how much do you take? Anywhere from as little as 5 to 10 mLs of the KE4, but some of these athletes will take a full bottle if money's no
Mhm.
object. We don't know that a full bottle does more. If there's any, well, there's no real, there's diminishing returns, but post workout there's not as much of a negative effect for taking too much. So during a
Mhm.
workout, you can have the negative effect, but post workout, if you take too much, it's not going to recover you less.
Gotcha.
It just becomes can be very expensive post workout. But people take as little as $2 to $4 worth post workout, and then that will also stop them from eating for a couple hours. Which I have an interview with Dr. Dog. He's this German doctor who talks about how he teaches Tour de France athletes how to use this, and he talks about this 2 hour gap of not eating after a workout and the benefits of what that triggers in the body.
Oh, interesting.
A
So this is
little bit above my
perfect for me to
science,
try
but yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah.
So, okay.
So that's how they've taken it. But people that are on our message boards and figure it out, they will take it sometimes one to two capfuls every 2 hours for multi-hour races and events.
Hmm.
Some people will take it without glucose. That's where I think the world is heading, but it takes a while for people to get off of this glucose addiction. Some will do what's called dual fuel. That sounds super sexy. I've got glucose and I've got ketones, and put them all together and go. But I don't think that that's going to be the best solution in the end. And there is recently a paper coming out where they did finally, after years and years of using glucose and ketones and me telling the researchers that's not the ideal way to take it, they finally did a trial where they compared ketone ester and glucose versus just ketone ester. And lo and behold, the ketone ester group performed significantly better. So that'll
Oh,
be a very,
interesting. Because
very groundbreaking. I've been saying it. Go look at my video 5 years ago where I say where we're going to be in 5 years.
so this is another thing. Like I go through different phases of like where I will work out completely fasted for the entire workout, and then other parts I kind of just like there's no real science behind it other than kind of like intuitively just listening to my body. Like right now, what I've been doing is I'll do that first like 20 to 30 minutes like warm up on the Stairmaster, like with just the like one shot of ketone KE4. And then right before I start lifting weights, I will take I'll eat a few dates, like pure, like basically pure glucose, and have another shot of KetoneAid KE4, and it feels like it gives me like and it could be placebo, but it feels like it gives me a lot of like power, like for like strength training, like moving weights around.
So
Now, what are your
I think
thoughts on that?
I think it will it may or will increase the maximum that you can lift,
Mm-hmm.
but with the ester, I think you're going to be able to do more reps of that weight, and then
Mm-hmm.
your recovery in between sets will be faster with the ester alone. Because so you got the
Interesting.
inflammation, the sugar will help for that, one off,
Explosive,
lifting
like yeah.
maximum exclusive, but then you need 3 or 4 minutes to recover for the next round. The ester,
Mm-hmm.
you won't be able to get that maximum, but if you do, normally do 8 reps, you're doing 10 reps of that thing. And then instead of waiting 4 minutes for the next round, you're able to do it in 2 minutes because your recovery in between sets improves. Even the recovery, bench pressing 10 times, each time your arms are going down, you're recovering. Even that immediate recovery is better. So it's just, it's different. So if someone's doing a CrossFit Games, maybe they train the entire off season with no glucose and just ketone ester, and they build more muscle. And yes, their peak performance might not be there, but then you're building more muscle. You're having 5 hard workouts a week instead of 4 or instead of 3. So that will build more muscle because you're more recovered. And then come game day, maybe it's a strategy that then you bring in the glucose for that, explosion, because you've had, several months of, building your muscles, without glucose, and then bringing it in on game day. So some athletes, many athletes, Tour de France athletes, will train at altitude. And that's a secret to build their lungs and the stuff that it does with your body and the oxygen. But their performance will be 10% worse. They literally, they know what it takes for them to ride 10 miles. They're 10% slower at altitude. No one gets mad. No one says, "Oh, this is horrible." No, because they know that they're building their system so that when they get down to ground level, they'll be much stronger. This is the same thing. You can work out on a ketogenic state or ketogenic with ketone esters. Well, let's say a ketogenic state first, and your baseline will be worse. You're going to just not perform as well, 5-10% lower weights. But who cares? If you're building the same muscle and you're more recovered the next day and you're not sore walking around, so you can do that workout again, you're going to build much more muscle doing that day in and day out versus, I have a new PR on my weight lift. Like, who cares? So it's very similar to the high altitude training with a ketogenic diet, for working out. But then the ketone ester, what's funny is the ketone ester then brings people back to their baselines. So they have a fuel. So before they had no fuel when they do a fasted workout, they're not using glucose, or they're a Ferrari with no gasoline. When you add the ketone ester, it's a fuel source that's compatible with all the benefits of fasting, low inflammation, all these other things. So then now they get closer, maybe to baseline. So they get the best of both worlds. They get the anti-inflammatory, all the benefits of a ketogenic diet, working out off season, plus a fuel source, get back up to baseline. And then the $1 million question is, what do you do game day? Do you bring back in the glucose? Do you your system is used to using ketones? We don't know. But maybe you selectively bring back in the glucose. You don't care how sore you are the next day after that. If it's a once every 3-month event, you're fine being sore. So maybe you just bring in the glucose for that, CrossFit Games. But if it's a CrossFit Games that has multiple events, 1 hour in between each one, I would then stick with the ketones, because your recovery in between those multiple events will just be insane. So it's very, very, it depends what you're using it for. And we've got NFL athletes that got off of sugar, and I did an interview with someone who trains multiple NFL athletes, and unexpectedly, caffeine was the main benefit that they found. They were able to get off of caffeine on game day because they were just hyping up with a bunch of caffeine and having these spikes and crashes, and they can't get back and they switched it out for the snake water, actually, and they had this even energy. And there was a clinical trial where they showed ketone ester with glucose versus just glucose for soccer sprint shuttle. And I said, hey, they're not going to sprint faster, so while you're at it, check their brain, because you're going to waste the clinical trial. Sure enough, 2 years later, the title is Cognitive Improvement in Soccer Sprint Shuttle Test. So the ketone ester group was, initially I thought that they were sharper at the end of the, vomiting induced sprinting workout, not from the ketones, just vomiting because they're sprinting all out. I thought that they were smarter than the glucose group, and I thought that was amazing. Then I heard a podcast of the guy talking. No, they weren't smarter. They were the same as the baseline. Their mental cognition was 2 answers wrong, placebo or ketone ester at the beginning and at the. If they took ketone ester at the beginning, they had 2 answers wrong, and at the end they had 2 answers wrong. If they took no ketones and just glucose, they had 2 answers wrong at the beginning and 4 answers wrong at the end. So there were twice as many wrong answers. But I thought that it was like 3. I thought it was going to be worse than the baseline at the beginning, worse than the test scores at the beginning. I thought they went from 2 wrong answers to 3, which was better than 4. No, they went from 2 and they stayed at 2. Now, what I try to tell the researcher is, imagine if you had just used ketones. It would have gone from 2 down to 1. They actually would have
Yeah.
improved their cognition, I think. But the idea of having a quarterback being as sharp in the fourth quarter as the first quarter is just changes everything. So
Yeah.
that's how the athletes are
So
using it.
I was trying to make the like I'm like, what's the importance of this? And
Yeah,
then you just
being
made it
as
for me.
sharp. Yeah.
Yeah,
Eh,
no, for
eh,
a quarterback, absolutely.
but
Because like for me,
even the
I
rest
don't
of the team,
care. Actually, you know what? This is a good point to make because like I always start my work day with my workout, and I would consider myself like somewhat intelligent and someone who uses their, I'm a knowledge worker. Like I use my brain to do my work. And so like if I can return to baseline after my workout using
oh yeah.
ketones, like that's a total like, enhancement to my overall performance. So I wanted to ask you a
Well, let me
question.
give you another example of a CEO that said that they didn't need ketones because they were always on and the brain's always sharp. And then I found out that he only scheduled his appointments before noon. And I said, why? He said, oh, well, afternoon I eat lunch and then my brain, I'm just not as sharp. I'm like, you didn't tell me that. So I changed the protocol for him. I said, just take it at 12 o'clock. And he took 1/3 of a KE1 bottle, so like $1.50 worth.
So break that down into caps for me because
So he took half of a cap, a little bit
okay.
more than half of a. He just took nothing, and it wasn't for the brain cognitive effect benefit, which you need more, like 1 or 2. It was more for not eating lunch, because that lunch was giving him the blood sugar spike and the blood sugar crash, which was making him
So
dumb and dragging.
he wasn't
He just skipped lunch.
okay.
So
Interesting.
so the $2 made him not spend $10. So people talk about Ketone Ester being expensive, not having a $5 or $10 lunch and swapping it out for a $1 or $2 drink. And then suddenly he was booking appointments in the afternoon. He doubled his production, his workday productivity because
This is
he
where
didn't
I
have that
need to
slump.
do some like personal research for
Yeah.
myself because I after once I eat, like it all depends on how I eat. Like if I eat like I've noticed that if I eat mostly raw, which I'm not a raw vegan like at all. Like I love cooked food, but if I eat mostly raw stuff for lunch, I don't get the crash. But if I eat like cooked food after my workout and for lunch, and I usually eat between like 11 and 1, sometimes as late as 3, but like once I have that meal, I'm kind of like pretty like brain dead for at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
a bit.
So that's what he avoided. So I wouldn't focus on the raw part though, because you could just as easily say that sentence and say that you had a bunch of raw fruit. If you had, I'm majorly anti-fruit. So if you had a bunch of raw fruit, you're going to get that blood sugar spike and crash.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'd
mostly
relook at,
produce for me. It's
okay,
like
then that's fine. If it's greens raw, that's
yeah.
fine. But if it's accidentally, because a friend of mine who turned vegan and his brain went to hell, he's like, oh, this vegan thing doesn't work. My brain went to hell. And I said, I know exactly what you did. You walked into Whole Foods. I had a webcam. I could watch you. You went to all the fruit sections and bought all this fruit and had all this fruit go through the cart. And you went home and thinking, oh, I'm now vegan. I'm now healthy. It's like, no, it's the fruit, stupid. Go do that. Go do that again. Focus on greens, celery, tons of avocado, and then report back to me. And that was the problem. That because I think he actually went from raw vegan, and then he went to carnivore. He's like, oh, that worked for me. I'm like, what do raw vegan and carnivore have in common? Well, first of all, they don't eat crap. But for him, the raw vegan, his raw vegan was all sugar based, and the
Mm,
sugar was exponentially worse than than any carnivore
yeah.
part of the equation. So yeah, it's what you eat.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. This show is brought to you by Feel Free from Botanic Tonics. This product is unlike anything I've ever had before. No joke. It's made with kava root and other ancient plants, and just half a shot gives me this incredible sense of focused flow and productivity. And I love to take just half a shot right before I work out. I take it with my pre-workout, and it takes my workouts to the next level. It is seriously unlike anything I've ever had. It's also an incredible productivity tool for any big work projects that you have or long periods of time where you just need to be super focused in flow state and get a lot of shit done. So if you want to give this a shot, you can go to botanictonics.com and use code DRAGON at checkout to get 40% off your first order. No joke. 40% off with code DRAGON. That's feel free from botanictonics.com, code DRAGON. Feel free, feel good. Yeah, I want to ask you a couple questions. So, in terms of like I was kind of on like a reverse diet / lean bulk, but now I want to like cut back down because I put on about 10 pounds, which I wanted to put on weight, but now I want to cut back down. And normally when I cut back down, I just go to a purely fasted workout, whereas before I was having some anywhere between 3 and 6 dates, or like 2 dates and like half a protein bar that was like super high protein and low fat. And, I felt very strong during my workouts, but I'm wondering now, if I want to cut, should I like work out completely fasted, no KE4, but then post workout have a shot or two of KE4, and then like kind of postpone for like 2 to 4 hours before the meal to like let my body like start like doing the muscle rebuilding, and then do another half shot before sleep to maximize my recovery?
Yeah. So if you're already motivated to get a hard 1 hour workout, taking ketone esters, and during that workout, sure, you might lift whatever percentage, a few percentage more. That's not going to make you more lean. You're just burning that. You're just burning that fuel and lifting that extra weight. So yeah, save it for post workout. Bring your brain back, and then maybe take some to skip that meal, depending on when you work out. If you can also use it to skip lunch, and you're trying to do this cut, having a morning workout, no breakfast, and then having no lunch. And then you may look at your dinner, and if your dinner is overly ravenous because you're making up for breakfast and lunch, you might consider taking a little bit of ester 30 minutes before your dinner. I don't really talk about that much because it gets a little bit confusing and into the weeds. It's kind of like the personal customization. But if it can suppress your appetite so that meal that you would have been ravished, you would have tried to do 1,500 calories to catch up. You take a little bit of ester beforehand, and you might only eat 1,000 calories, so you're knocking off another 500. We don't tend to talk about that. We tend to say empty stomach, no food on both sides for a couple hours. But that is one way that you can try to extend your fast even more, and then kind of see if you can take off 20% of the dinner.
Question, and I know this is a terrible habit, and I've been doing some testing around it. Like I like to eat and then go to sleep. Like, so I'll eat and go to sleep like 20, 30 minutes later. And I know you're supposed to like wait 2 to 3 hours. And I've done testing, and my recovery does improve when I do that. But there's something in me mentally that wants to like eat right before I go to sleep, because then I feel full and comfortable. So in that case, we don't need to talk about that. That's a separate conversation. But in that case that I just had dinner, would it make sense to have half a cap or a cap right before bed? Because I just ate.
You could still try it. It just might not be as effective. So when you're trying it different ways, you actually might go up a little bit. So instead of that half capful, you take one, because you're kind of countering a little bit of that dinner. So you'd have to check your Oura ring and see if you can find patterns. But Oprah Winfrey, I remember, I don't know why, 20 years ago, like her number one weight loss thing was not eating after 8 p.m. Because having all that energy that isn't used and just go straight to sleep, like that's the exact opposite of cutting. You're just storing all of that energy as fat. So
and like I love Oprah, but Oprah's not in very like I'm sub 10% body fat. You know what I mean?
Just the concept of having all that food. At least go for a walk around the block, like do a little bit. It has to get stored somewhere. It's not being used, has to get stored. So that might be a little bit counterproductive, and maybe the ketones will change your desire and perceptions and just change whatever's
maybe
in
I
you
try like half a cap right before dinner, and then half a cap or a cap right before bed. I'll do some personal testing and report back to you. I want to talk about some of the things.
People do report a half an hour more deep sleep when they get it right. So we've had people send us their Oura Ring data. Mike Mutzel say, here's my entire week Oura Ring data, 45 minutes, and here's the Ketone Ester. And it went, to an hour and 15, and then the next day was back down. So that's what you're looking for, is a deeper sleep. And you know that you've taken too much if your sleep is more shallow. So if your dreams are more vivid, that means you've turned on the brain. We don't want to turn on the brain and make your body more active. We want to take a tiny amount, which we think is more of a signaling molecule that we haven't quite figured out. But it's helping stop people from waking up 2 or 3 times a night. 1/3 of our Amazon reviews are for sleep. It was an accidental find. We told people initially not to take it for sleep, but they're like, I slept like a baby. I swear I've never slept that well. I normally wake up, or I went to bed with the cell phone on my chest, and I woke up 8 hours later. My cell phone was still on my chest. I hadn't moved all night. So that's what you're going for. And sometimes I take too much. I'm like, oh, there's an important meeting with whatever the next day, and I'll take 10 mLs instead. And then sure enough, I'm like, damn it, I didn't listen to my own advice, and it messed up my sleep. So you really have to find that.
Yeah, you're a maximizer like me.
And if you're up really late at night, like at 2 or 3 a.m., have to wake up for a 5 a.m. flight, then I'll increase it to 10, sometimes 15. I've found that I can take much more if I'm super, super tired. And then I wake up and I'm 3 hours later with the kids flying to New Orleans, and wife's like, you only got 3 hours of sleep. How are you? And, the Ketone Ester really helped with that. But the Tour de France people, they'll take 60 mLs, the entire bottle, immediately before bed after a 5-hour day. So it does depend how tired you are as well. So if I have not worked out one day versus having worked out, I'm going to take a different amount. So it's like how tired you are.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about stacking it with other things. All right, Frank. So are there any really great things to combine the KE4 with any like other supplements or anything, like someone who really just wants to like maximize the, their performance in their gym workout or their cycling ride or some sort of sports performance? And then, kind of the performance side. And then also, I don't know if you know enough or if you're aware enough about it, but like, maybe like either muscle building or fat loss, like, so any kind of different stacks that you're aware of.
Well, for the most part, we've kind of put it all into snake water. Like if there was an ingredient that existed that we thought was better, we put it into snake water. And when people have gone through our product line of KE4, and then they go to KE1, which is the diluted, easier to drink, easier to slow release into a water bottle, they make it to snake water. They tend to not go back because they actually find that they can take less of it because of all the other adjuncts in it. So it actually costs, even though it costs more on a per gram of ketone basis, they can take less of it. So we did snake water, but in general, I have given people individual ingredients in the snake water and said, hey, stack this with this. One of them is salt, just flat out. KE4 does not have salt in it, but you might want to check your electrolytes because it kind of, if it triggers a ketogenic diet, you might have some water loss and you might lose some excess salt. So if you find, I'm cramping when I take KE4, we don't hear that too often, but just being aware of it, maybe if you already have a salt solution, increasing that by, 10, 20, 30, 40% might be something to consider. So salt, 2 favorite ingredients, dynamine and T-creen. You can buy them separately on Amazon, just little powders. That would be something that you can take, with or without the KE4.
And what's the dynamine and T-creen do? Are they nootropics? Are they stimulants?
Nootropics that are technically not stimulants, so they don't raise your heart rate like caffeine, but they have many of the caffeine type of effects. The dynamine is more of a fast release, and the T-creen is a slower release. So that's why we combine both of them, so you kind of get this sustained. But you could selectively just do one. They have a tasteless version that you can get that you put in water. You got to drink within a half an hour, otherwise the taste will, I think, come through. So you could definitely stack with some of that. Branched chain amino acids, there might be some benefits there, but I think salt would be the main thing that I tell people to make sure you're still getting your salt intake.
So I'll often put like in my like water bottle like just like some ground pink Himalayan salt. Great. Is that like would work? Oh, perfect, because I do that anyways.
You might consider getting some potassium citrate pills to have a little bit of a balance, so it's not just sodium, just a sodium load. So having some potassium. You can also get, there's restaurant shaker salts that are, they call it no salt, and it's just potassium. It's like the potassium version of sodium salt, but it will solidify very quickly. So either leave it in the fridge or put some rice in it, because it'll turn. It's very hydroscopic. It'll turn. But the KE1 drink that we have does solve the salt problem. It has 90 milligrams of sodium, 25 potassium, 15 calcium. So it has more than a Gatorade in salt is already in the KE1. And if you do end up taking the entire bottle, which is 2 servings, then you're getting 200 milligrams. But it's still less expensive to take the KE4 and get your salt elsewhere.
Okay.
So but then caffeine is, let's talk about caffeine and stacking it with the ketone ester.
One quick question before I just been wondering, like, I noticed that the KE4, it does have calories in it. Like, if you're somebody who's like counting your macros and counting your calories, do you need to count it towards them?
Well, this wouldn't, it would break that matrix, because it's not a protein fat, it's its own thing. And one capful is only 12 calories. So I wouldn't be counting that, because that 12 calories should easily reduce what you're eating by a couple hundred calories. So it's a 10x return on investment. You take in 12 calories, but you eat 100, 200, 300, 400 calories less.
Gotcha.
Your net effect is your head. But if you already can fast, someone said, I can already skip breakfast and lunch easily, and I just eat dinner. And I'm like, well, if you take ketone ester, it's not going to make you skip breakfast and lunch more. Like, you already skip breakfast and lunch. The ketone ester isn't going to make you burn more fat in that instance. But if you have a hard time skipping lunch, you take a little bit of ketone ester, and it makes it so you can walk by the kitchen and not even look at the cabinets, not even think about food, then great. Then you're going to be, net ahead.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's move on to caffeine, the one drug that I am for sure still addicted to.
So caffeine, I'm anti-caffeine. I think caffeine is a stimulant, so it raises your heart rate. And what Tim Ferriss says is with caffeine is what goes up comes down. So you're definitely getting an upper that will then lead sometime later into a downer, and oftentimes even affecting people's sleep. People say, "Oh, I stopped drinking at 10 a.m., noon, 2 p.m., but I still have bad sleep." But they don't attribute it to the caffeine. But so it could still be that caffeine. Even if you only take 1 cup at 7 a.m., it can still mess up your sleep, because there's other things that happen with cortisol spikes and stuff like that. I didn't take caffeine for my first 40 years. I just never liked coffee and didn't get used to it. And then Bulletproof coffee came around, had coffee, and I loved it. Like, this is amazing. But after 2 weeks, it stopped working. But for the next 4 years, I was still trying to seek that high that I had, and I remembered for the first 2 weeks. It stops working. And even if people are selective and, I only do it twice a week, it just doesn't work. It doesn't do what you think it does. And there's a great book, I have it open on the other screen, called The Easy Way to Quit Caffeine. And it goes in, it's like a $2 Kindle book. It goes into detail on how the perception of focus, and how it's not really focus. It's your brain constantly trying to get that next caffeine hit, so you're distracted. So once you get the caffeine hit, you're actually focused, but you're not really more focused than you would have been if you hadn't gotten into the mess in the first place. So it's distraction because you have the withdrawals of not having the caffeine, and you quench that withdrawal, and then you somehow think that that's focus, and it's not focused. It doesn't, I don't think it does anything for you. And the ketone ester with the caffeine, some companies, they sell these racemic ketone salts or ketone salts, and 90% of their sales are with caffeine. And says only, 80 milligrams. The ketones deliver the caffeine more. And people think that it's a buy one, get one free. That's like having 2 cups of coffee for the price of one. No, it's like having 2 cups of coffee and, having that double spike, which will then lead to a double crash afterward. So the ketones, deliver that caffeine. And sometimes when I hear people take the ketone ester and they feel super pumped up, I say, did you have caffeine too? And they said, yeah. I'm like, well, it might not be the ketones that you're feeling. You might be feeling the multiplying of that caffeine. And some people say, I don't feel caffeine. I can drink coffee or tea at 4 p.m. And I had lunch with someone, it was 4 p.m. having tea. And he looked up at me after taking the ketones. He's like, oh my God. And I said, what's in that tea? Is it caffeine? Oh yeah, but I don't feel caffeine. Okay, but now you do. Like it
So it's
delivered
basically like
the
a force
caffeine.
multiplier. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So some companies say, "Oh, it's the secret sauce. Put them together." I just don't consider that healthy. It's just delivering more caffeine, more of this drug.
Yeah.
So people have used ketones to get off of caffeine. Eventually, one day, you have on your question here, upcoming projects, maybe in the next year or two, we'll have
Yeah.
a coffee that is only decaf but has ketones in it. So you kind of have that same baseline feeling, so you don't have that withdrawal feeling of like not having the caffeine, and help people get off of caffeine. But we've helped doctors and nurses that take caffeine, throughout the entire day. They'll take 12 hours of caffeine to kind of stay awake.
Mm-hmm.
They can switch over to the ketone ester and have a more steady energy and not have these spikes and crashes, which then destroy their sleep, which then leads to like worse sleep, which leads to just people just being dragged, just being worn down and dragged and wondering why.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Fit Rich Vegan. If you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, double your income, and 10x your savings and investments, then this is the coaching program for you. But wait a minute, Dragon. Isn't this your coaching program? Heck yeah, it is. I spent the last 8 years mastering my fitness and my finances, and I've built an incredible coaching program with an incredible team to help you get the body of your dreams and finally achieve that level of financial success that you've been seeking. So if you want to find out if you're a good fit for the program, go to fitrichvegan.com and book your free consultation today. Or you can just DM me on Instagram with the words FitRichVegan, and we can chat about if it's going to be a good fit for you. I'm committed to empowering people to actually achieve their fitness and financial goals. I spent the last 20 years trying to figure this out on my own. And what I realized is the key to doing it is not doing it alone. You have to have coaches, you have to have mentors, and you have to be a part of masterminds. And that's exactly what Fit Rich Vegan has. It has coaches, mentors, and it is a mastermind. So again, if you're ready to book your free consultation today, go to fitrichvegan.com or drop me a DM on Instagram. So I don't actually drink coffee. I drink matcha, like ceremonial grade matcha. Like, what are your thoughts on, I don't, so I wake up and I have my matcha, and so far I haven't tried stacking the KE4 with matcha in the morning. I just have it, before my workout with my pre-workout, which does have caffeine in it that is sourced from, I think, coffee. So I'm just curious, thoughts on having the KE4 with the matcha. And then after we talk a little bit more about using caffeine, let's talk about how do you use KE4 to get off of caffeine.
So I would make the analogy that it's like comparing street alley cocaine to organic pharmaceutical cocaine. So cocaine. So I mean, it's caffeine is caffeine.
So it's like cocaine compared to like Adderall, which is like basically pharmaceutical grade cocaine.
Okay, yeah. So it's still the base molecule, which is like if we get into alcohol, they're all ethanol based alcohols. Whether you take whiskey, tequila, wine, it's all ethanol. It doesn't really matter. So for me, whether you get it from tea or caffeine or get your caffeine from tea or coffee, doesn't matter. And these doctors that promote, oh, well, coffee makes you live longer. What does the consumer hear? Because they cite some papers that coffee makes you live longer and they have evidence of it. The consumer hears caffeine coffee makes you live longer. I actually went to the goddamn paper finally, and I found a footnote that said, we analyzed, these 100,000 people that live in Greece or whatever, and we found no discernible difference between those that drank caffeinated versus decaf coffee. It's like, okay, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about the caffeine making you live longer, or the ingredients in coffee that are still there with decaf? So people want to hear about papers that support their whatever they're taking that they know is a vice. They want to hear some doctor saying, oh, a coffee a day is good for this and that. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
initially,
I fully admit caffeine is for sure a drug, and I'm still addicted to it. You know,
yeah,
I'm sober from alcohol and marijuana, but I still consider myself addicted to caffeine. Like if I
yeah.
don't have it in a day, I'm like hardly functional.
So it can take a good 40 days to get off of caffeine. And initially I got off of caffeine, and then I brought it back just for special occasions once every 2 weeks, and just for that special meeting. And then somehow I didn't have a meeting for a month, 2 months with COVID, and then I had a special meeting. I was like, okay, now I'm going to take caffeine. And I looked at myself, I'm like, wait a second, I am 100% firing right now. Like, I don't need it. You don't need it. So even that once every 2 weeks thing was not letting me break free from just not needing it at all. So yeah, I think it's and there's one lady who said, oh, I took the ketone ester and it didn't work for me. It did nothing for me. And a half an hour discussion later, I find out that she normally would take 5 cups of coffee. And then she went down to the ketone ester and it quote unquote did nothing. And I said, well, what happens when you normally don't have coffee? Oh, I'm irritable, a brain fog, and all these, headaches. Give me all these side effects. Okay, and you had ketone ester and you felt nothing, as in none of those side effects? She's like, yeah, I just didn't feel any extra energy. I'm like, oh man, this is a tough crowd. You went from 5 cups of coffee to a little bit of ketone ester and you were just at baseline. Like, man, that's the best we can do. Like, tomorrow, go ahead and add in a little bit of caffeine so you can feel that boost. And then, but yeah, so you can, try to swap them out. But, for you to get off of it, you're going to have to, up the amount. I would also consider tyrosine. Tyrosine is a great supplement that will help remove some of the cravings and withdrawal. That would be something that you could stack, well with the ester.
Yeah.
But you might have to go to 2 capfuls every 2 or 3 hours for the first 2 or 3 days to get off of that caffeine. And then hopefully you can lower the amount as you go on, and then see if you can do 40 days without caffeine. And it's very liberating. Oh, you know how that is to be off of something. So something to consider.
I'm definitely open to trying it. It's one of those things, like, I'll know when it's the right time in my life to like finally do that. Cause like you kind of have to have, at least for me, like I feel like I have to have the space in order to kind of like tackle that one. And right now, like I just,
you might try the dynamine and T-creen. So those are really very similar, and those might 1-for-1, especially with the ketone ester, allow you to really be just taking another white powder that's just in a slightly different form that won't have all the other consequences.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit. I know we got about 15 minutes left before you got to jump to your call, but let's talk a little bit about your alcohol alternative. We haven't covered that one too much.
Yeah, sure. That's so that's the R13, and it's kind of confusing, but once people understand it, it just, when the light bulb goes off, it's like, holy moly. So all beer, vodka, wine today is ethanol based. If you distilled them all down, they all have the molecule ethanol. People often think that beer and wine and vodka are different types of alcohol. No, they're all one alcohol. And for the last 2,000 years, the only alcohol that humans have ever been able to drink is ethanol. So there's propyl alcohol, hand sanitizing alcohol, can't drink that, makes you go blind. So this is a whole new classification of alcohol, and it's called R13-butanediol. This is that molecule that the scientists said that the mice were getting buzzed and drunk. So ethanol, the reason that it's harmful is ethanol converts to acetaldehyde. That is the toxic ingredient that makes you hungover, horrible HRV scores, highly addictive. That's what causes all the problems. That's the toxin. So if we just created a drink that was an alcohol that converted into water while giving you a buzz, converted into water, that would be cover of Time magazine, I think. But this is actually one step better than that. This is, instead of converting to water, it converts to ketones. Converts to beta hydroxybutyrate, and 1 can will skyrocket your ketones 1 to 2 millimolars if you're to test your blood ketones at the peak, which is like 45 minutes after. So it is just crazy incredible drink that still gives you a little bit of a buzz. The buzz is different. It's more of a relaxation type feeling, not an angry bar fight kind of feeling. It's a subtle, shorter lived feeling. Oftentimes people have to drink 2 the first time to kind of feel it and recognize it. Because if you just drink 1, you're like, oh, I kind of feel like I'm in a better mood, but maybe it's just me. You kind of attribute it back to yourself. When you have 2, you feel a little bit of the tingling in the fingers and you feel 10% lighter. And you're like, okay, this is really hitting me. And then they go back to the 1 drink because they don't need to. It's also unlike regular alcohol. You have 1 sip and one lady said that, hey, if I had 1 sip of a 6-pack, I would have to drink the entire 6-pack and wake up the next morning thinking about where I can get my, next beer. She was able to drink half of a can of one of these things, feel it. Usually people don't feel it with half. She felt it with half of a can, put it back in the fridge. Next morning, forgot that she had even taken it. So it's just a drastic night and day difference when it comes to cravings. People will drink 1 or 2 and not crave the 3rd one and 4th one. You just don't have that potato chip type craving to have another one and another one and another one, because ketones are an appetite suppression and a craving suppressant. So it makes you not want that next drink and next drink. So that might hurt sales because it doesn't make people, drink 6 or 12 in a sitting. But, in the long term, if you can have something that's healthier, that you can, cut out that 1 or 2 glasses of wine a day. Like we have these wellness centers that say, hey, the best thing that we can do for these customers is cut out that 1 or 2 glasses of wine a night. Like all these other things, eating differently, running differently, working out, nothing compares to just cutting out that 1 drink of wine a night. And by using this drink, people actually report better deep sleep compared to water. Not even, it's light years better than ester, but more deep sleep using one of these drinks than just regular water. And compared to ethanol, we have on our Instagram someone who posted that they took 2 shots of tequila and their sleep score was 35, and then they took 2 drinks of ours and their sleep score was 75. Just night and day difference versus ethanol. I do find that there is a diminishing return. If you have more than 1, then your sleep score is not going to be better. But 1, it's better, and then 2 or 3, you're not going to be hungover like having regular alcohol. But if you had too much, everything will catch up to you, eventually. But that drink is very, very promising. Some people might think, well, if I can get my ketones up high, why don't I take a pre-workout? It just doesn't work. It just, they take it. Yeah, their ketones might be high, but there's this biochemistry thing that's confusing where it has to do with NAD and NADPH ratios and how energy is created. Your ketones might be high, but it just doesn't do the same thing.
You just want to relax.
So yeah, and you don't. Some people slur their words. There's one woman at a conference, she wouldn't drink a sip of mine, and I respected that. I said that's fine, no big deal. But then she went off and drank a competitor who's selling the drink without disclosing that it's an alcohol, and she came back and she was slurring her words. And I said, "Did you just take a shot of that stuff?" She's like, "Yeah." It's like, you wouldn't take a sip of mine, and you took the equivalent of an entire can in under 3 seconds. She was slurring her words in front of me. And she's like, oh my God, I'm not drunk, but I'm buzzed. Yeah. So that drink has a lot of promise. We've had, recovering alcoholics drink it and not trigger them. We've had people, help with their withdrawal symptoms, the shakes and stuff like that. So we're hoping to do clinical trials to prove out all of these things that have already been shown in mice and anecdotally. But that's what biohacking is. That's what's, getting ahead of, the 10 years that it's going to take to prove any of this stuff.
Yeah. So question for you, like me, I have no craving for alcohol whatsoever. Would it make sense for me to even try it, or am I better off just not drinking alcohol or, the R13?
That's a tough one. I mean, I don't know. If you already have an addictive personality and you're doing fine, not getting, any type of buzz from any product, then maybe not. Just stick with the KE4 and just be laser focused. If you don't need that, relaxation, cool down effect, then stick with the KE4 or the ketone water. We can just have multiples of that a day. I think you're going to freak out when you see that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that one. And I really appreciate you being so honest and not trying to just sell me on it. So you just won some points from me for that one.
No, yeah. If you're doing good and you don't need it, don't. and it's going to stress you out too. Just the thought, is it alcohol, and just like, am I cheating on myself? Like I can't be the answer for you. Only you can take a deep dive and understand, does this qualify? Does this count? Will this trigger stuff? And maybe over the time, if you see other people that have had problems and they use this to help their problems. We had one biohacking nurse, 1 bottle of wine per day, per night, she would drink. And then the next morning, she'd have inflammation that she got used to. She didn't even realize it. She switched over to 2 cans of this, and it's now been 10 months and she hasn't had any wine. She wasn't planning on stopping wine. She didn't consider herself addicted, but it was 1 bottle of wine every night. Yeah. She started taking 2 cans of this, waking up without the inflammation in the morning. It felt like, she said sometimes she does ice baths. It felt like the inflammation was, lower, like the ice baths. And, for her, it was, amazing. But if you don't have the cravings and you don't need, something to help relax at the end of the night, then maybe not.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So what are you most excited about? I mean, I know this alcohol alternative, you're making all these different flavors, but then you also made this mention, the coffee. Like, what are you most excited about right now?
Well, kind of talking about entrepreneurship and business for a second, there's this shiny red apple syndrome where you're just like, you got something that's good, but you're like, oh, but what about this? What about this next thing? And I've been doing that, for a while. We had to focus on the KU4 because any distraction from that was slowing down production. We even had customers that bought $1,000 worth, but then we were sold out and someone needed it for some emergency. I'd have them FedEx to this other customer. Like, customers were giving products to other customers. An Olympic athlete needed something that morning, in Chicago, and I found a person in Chicago and had them drive the product over to the customer to, give them Ketone Ester. So I finally came out with the KU1, which is the watered down, better tasting. We solved the taste problem. Check. And then it's like, okay, then we got the snake water. That'll be just so fun. If nothing else, it's just for me, because I love the Joe Isuzu commercials where the guy says, this car will go 500 miles per hour or my grandmother will be shot dead. And then grandma gets shot. So I just love the advertising and marketing, just putting the whole kitchen sink, all these stacks onto it. And then it was like, but we need to make something that's just consumer yummy, 7-Eleven ready. And then, so finally came out with the ketone water. What I'm excited about is turning the snake water into a 12-ounce drink. So that will be the energy drink.
So that will be like the bang.
Right. The high, that'd be the high sweetness, as opposed to the functional ketone water is a very low sweetness, very subtle, very smooth. You barely taste it, as little sweetness as we could put in it. But then the snake water will be the high sweetness, high that T-cream and the dynamine and all those adjuncts, and just be a much, much healthier drink than all these caffeine energy drinks that add creatine and B12.
You're gonna have to come up with a clever name for it, like Jack Snake or something.
No, it's just gonna be snake. It's just gonna be snake water. Just snake water, a 12-ounce snake water drink. So I'm excited to get that done as well.
Awesome. All right, brother. Well, huge thank you for coming on the show and doing a deep dive on all things ketone esters and all the science and origin story. That was really awesome. And your entrepreneurial journey, I really appreciate it. I know the audience is going to love it as well. So thank you so much for your time and energy.
Coupon code as well with Dragon.
That's right. Yeah, for everyone, you could definitely buy all of his products on Amazon, but you'll save a lot of money just ordering it direct from KetoneAid.com. And you can use code DRAGON to get free shipping, which will then make it significantly cheaper than just buying it on Amazon.
And you can also stack it. You guys like stacking, so you can stack it with the subscription as well. So you can get the free shipping and the 10% off for doing a subscription.
Awesome. Perfect. Frank, thanks so much for coming on the show, brother.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. And remember, literally everything can be used as an opportunity to learn, to heal, to grow, and to transform. So whatever is going on in your life, choose to consciously and proactively harness that energy and use it to alchemize your life to the next level. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or on your favorite social media and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. As always, you can find me at Justin David Carl on Instagram and all the socials, as well as at alchemizelife.com on the web. Until the next time, sending you lots of energy and plenty of dragon magic.